Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video, I want to talk about the hunt for a good midfielder. Something that has seemingly plagued United for some time, maybe. The search for a midfielder for United is, I think, a little more complicated than it seems at face value. It should be really simple to get a midfield, but I think where a lot of the complication lies as you look into it more and more is first having to answer the question of what kind of midfielder United actually trying to build. And I think that has been one of the things that has evolved over the years. When you go from manager to manager, from Jose, who wanted clearly that two hardworking midfielders who could pass the ball, move it from deep, distribute from deep, get the team on the run, all of that, to potentially Solskjaer, who wanted, again, two grafters in that deep role, two hardworking players and behind a 10, not too dissimilar from Jose Mourinho, to Eric Ten Hag that came in and said, you know what, I want that single pivot Frankie de Jong to sit in there, do a Busquets kind of role, turn things around, be the pivot on which all play rests. Didn't quite get that done either. To now Ruben Amorim, who plays a little bit kind of like maybe Solskjaer in the midfield, a deep pivot, two players, hardworking, grafters. That's what he had at Sporting. But it also evolved over the years into, I think, a more progressive way that could potentially fit into a more dominant side. The question still becomes, what are United actually looking for? And that's what I wanted to first talk about before we dive into some of the prospects that United are watching at this point in time and could make a move for. United have been looking at midfielders. They're currently still scouting midfielders. They were well in for Carlos Balaba at the end of the summer, and they are very likely to be at least weighing up whether they can make some kind of move for a midfielder in January. And in addition, will certainly 100% without a doubt be looking to sign 1 to 2 midfielders next summer. Now, a big part of this hinges on the question, again, of who is the other player in the midfield. And this is one of the challenges that we see here in terms of determining who the right midfielder is, and why I personally go back and forth on trying to figure it out. Right now, as we've seen, it's Bruno Fernandez. This is something that is often criticized, often looked at like, well, putting Bruno deep. He's not good defensively. He's not good off of the ball. I think the concern of putting him deep and taking him off of the attacking range is actually a far less of a concern. From what I can tell, he's getting about as many final third touches as he ever has. And part of the reason for that is because he's more involved in building up play, more involved in the attacking patterns that Ruben Amorim wants the team to do, getting the ball out wide quickly and all of that. I'm not saying it's been perfect. It's a little more risky. It leaves United open to transitions, but it's the off the ball that it's a bit more concerning. Is that the idea for the future? Because if it is, if Bruno, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is if Bruno is saying he's going to stay longer, well, he's not going to Saudi. He might have the option for moves within Europe. If he does stay, then he's very likely to be the guy. And you know, if that happens, then what is the partner that we need for him? You know, at this point in time, who's the right person? And I think that's where we have to look at a few of the kind of flaws here, because I was surprised to see, obviously at the start of the season, Casemiro as the partner. Well, not surprised because we saw it in preseason, but I was bothered by it when I look at the names that are available, when I looked at everybody that was available. And then we saw games with Bruno and Casemiro. We've seen games with Bruno and Ugarte. And the games with Bruno and Ugarte, we have lost. And one might look at that and say, well, that just means Ugarte's bad. Trust me, a lot of people are saying that. Fine. You can think that if you want. I broke all those games down, and it usually does come down to the problem of partnering Bruno Fernandez and what you actually need and want. Let's take a look here at City, because this was the first game that Casemiro was actually not in the starting lineup for, and it went really, really poorly in the midfield, at least out of possession. And I just want to go back to this moment because these happened a few times during the game. Bruno Fernandez has a little bit of a tendency to just forget his man. But I also want to note just how high up Ugarte is here. His natural instinct is to be coming over and be stepping in front of players, blocking the passing lanes, blocking the channels off, and stopping attacks from coming through. That was City. If we look at Sunderland in the final minutes when Ugarte is on instead of Casemiro, we can see this again. Ugarte is up high. He's stepped up really high, blocking this angle off, blocking some passes through the lines here. And Bruno, once again, to a degree, kind of forgets where he's supposed to be. It looked at first like this might be Shaw, but it's not. This was really Bruno's guy to drop in. Point being, whenever it's Bruno and Ugarte, the issue is both of them want to press up quite a bit high. And this leaves this space. And I've been talking about this since the first game of the year, because this is where Everton exploited us, is this space between the center backs and the midfield. It can be solved by the center backs being really aggressive and really quick to step out. An argument can be made that that might solve it. And it can be solved by the number 6 being a little bit more defensive in his positioning to sit deeper in that space. You lose one man in the line of press, but you sit a bit deeper. Maybe you balance it out with pressing higher from the wide areas. We don't really know what the answer is here, but I want to demonstrate the difference. With Ugarte, he wants to press up high with, let's take, where is my picture here? Here we go. Let's take Casemiro. I noted through the Sunderland game, Casemiro very often naturally dropping into this position. Pardon me for all the crazy arrows going everywhere. But Casemiro, when Bruno would pass off a runner, like in this case, Casemiro's usually sat kind of in front of the back 5. Now, this can, or back 3, depending on the phase of play. Now, this can make the team too defensive sometimes, where they get into a really quickly into a flat back, whereas when they have Ugarte on, he's usually pressing up higher, winning the ball higher, and it's a bit of a different sort of setup. But I'm not sure whether it's better or worse. What is the long-term goal? This is a question we don't know. If it's to be partnered with Bruno, if it's someone like Ugarte, you have to have incredibly aggressive center backs stepping up into that gap pretty much at all times. They have to be so quick to do it. So maybe getting better center backs will fix that problem, and we can get a more aggressive number 6. Or, if not, the safer route, potentially, is to go with Casemiro. And my research has shown that the Casemiro, we are currently performing better with Casemiro. So maybe a number 6 that more reflects Casemiro. And it's important to watch the players because statistically this season, Casemiro and Ugarte have actually been identical. Even the oft-criticized Ugarte over progressive passing, his forward passing has actually been better than Casemiro's this year so far. Higher percentage, just as progressive. But they're really, really similar this year in how they play. But the difference is where they play. If we look at Casemiro, we can see that most of his touches are coming from these deeper zones. Yeah, he gets forward from time to time. If we look at Ugarte, we can see that he is certainly a little bit more rambunctious at getting around the pitch when he is on. And as we've seen, playing with Bruno, that's not necessarily a good thing. Now, if it was to be partnering someone else, would it be better? I don't know. Because we really don't know the answer of whether it would work not having someone sitting in front of that back 3, whether the other 8 would be different. In Amram's system, I actually think that that it does need a bit of that sitter to kind of rest, to kind of sit in front of the back 3 to do that. I think otherwise the gaps are always going to be too big because you're always going to be asking too much of the center backs in terms of how quickly they step up and read danger, where your number 6 can just kind of block those angles off just by being there. It can make you a little bit too defensive, but the alternative to that is playing attacking wingbacks, making them stay high. So you have your front 3, attacking wingbacks, your number 8. That gives you basically 6 attackers on the pitch at any time, like any other top club would have. So it would appear at face value that we want a bit more of a defensive 6. Obviously, it could change based on whoever the number 8 is, but a bit more of a sitter. And I think that that's where we go and look at some of the names that I want to discuss that we know United have been looking at, and who would be kind of the right fits and who would be my pick. And again, you really do have to go watch these players to get an idea of what they're going to do. But I think the first conclusion we can make is that at least in the present iteration of this system, and it was the same at Sporting with Hjulmand, who we'll actually talk about in a moment, you want a bit more of a sitter who reads danger than a more aggressive player in Ugarte. And again, the stats can be misleading. Someone like Ugarte is probably more of the 8 in this system. And I say Ugarte as a comparison who's in the United team, because statistically him and Casemiro are the same, but they play very differently actually on the pitch. So in looking at these names, some of them I think are better as 8s. Let's first talk about one young name, which is Bouaddi. A really, really exciting, very, very interesting young player at Lille. Now we know buying some of these midfielders from France, probably a good idea. This is a player who is on United's radar. At the moment, his strengths are pretty much defensively, winning the ball, winning duels, carrying, all of that. If we look at where he plays, it's a mixed all over the place. He seems to get forward a little, but I think obviously that also, of course, depends upon the numbers when you're looking at whether they're dominating possession and all of that. But I think that he is somebody that could fit. When I have watched him, I think he is a player. He's got decent size. I think he could sit deep. I think he could win the ball at a high level, be competent on it, be able to take it out of pressure, receive it, help in the build-up. One of the areas where I think personally that he would struggle to start is these progressive passings. Again, as we go back even to Ugarte and Casemiro this year, believe it or not, both have actually been pretty good. Yes, even Ugarte, and I went back and watched some things, has actually been pretty good at getting the ball, sending it long into those wide channels forward in what would be considered a progressive pass. So while Bouaddi would be, I think, a very good player, where he might struggle a little in this system is being able to make those quick turns and fires up into the wing at this point in time. But defensively, I think he would work. And he's a top young player. I mean, he's 18 years old, just turned 18. Someone on United's radar, someone absolutely worth a look if they're going to be searching for a young, high prospect player. But I would suggest maybe he wouldn't be instantly a hit. And so you probably want him if you're going to get 2 midfielders for that position, which I would suggest we might do over the course of January and summer. With Casemiro departing, I don't really think we have anybody who fits that sitting role particularly well. Now, again, could be we don't need that. We go and get center backs. We get more aggressive midfielders. But at the moment, that doesn't look to be the case. Then we can look at Yarmaluka, 21 years old at Brentford. Obviously, again, playing in quite a low possession side. So he's doing a lot of his ball winning from deep. He does win the ball a lot. A bit more of a deep destroyer than anything else. I would suggest someone like Yarmaluka, good player, unsure about the scalability, again, to a team that also does actually have a lot of the ball, that does need a bit more of those moving the ball around, but he would provide for a good shield. And again, if we went more aggressive on the wing backs, maybe that would work. So we've got a young option in Bouaddi, and I think a player in Yarmaluka that is a good Premier League proven player that is doing a decent job from deep, albeit in a very limited scope in terms of what he's being asked to do. And that does have to come into consideration. But maybe that would provide some stability. A player like that could be a good depth player moving forward in this system. Then we get into names that I think potentially have more merit. This is Hjulmand at Sporting, and I would not be surprised to see United come back in for Hjulmand. Essentially, you look at him versus these guys, and he's basically the same. The only real difference statistically between Hjulmand and Casemiro and Ugarte is that he doesn't win a lot of the ball because it's an easier league and Sporting have an enormous lion's share of possession. So on a per game basis, he's just not going to win the ball that much. But essentially, if we map him compared to these guys, he is doing the current job that they are doing. And he is, I've said before, probably the closest thing we could get to Casemiro at this point in time. He's going to sit deep. He's not particularly pacey. He's a good reader of the game. He sniffs out danger. He'll probably sit in front of that back line. He's got a really good long pass on him as well. Switching of play, moving the ball around. He's probably the right guy, to be honest. And so depending on whether or not United are looking for, you can see how, he's able to get up here more because Sporting have a lot of the ball, but he just, essentially covers the whole ground in terms of in the league there. If United are looking for someone right now, January or summer, to say, hey, we want somebody who's going to make an impact right now that can do this job, then Hjulmand is someone that will definitely come into consideration. So we'll see if they will be coming in for Hjulmand again. They definitely considered him throughout summer. They've definitely considered him a few times in the last few years. Weaknesses, he's about as good as he's going to be. He's never going to be ultra athletic. He's going to be basically very similar to Casemiro right now, but you're going to get more years out of him. So there's a ceiling with him, but he's going to provide you with consistency on a weekly basis. This is probably a safe option. Now, you shouldn't be paying 80, 90 million for this option, but if you can get him in the 40 to 50 bracket, I think he's a really, really good buy that could sit, do the job, shield the defense, all of that. Then we move to the next one, Adam Wharton. Adam Wharton is one I kind of went away from in myself in thinking, would he be the best option? And it's mostly because, of course, he plays in a bit of a different system at Glasner. Now, effectively, however, the system is almost the same. Now, my consideration of Amram's midfield prior, and why I kind of went away from Wharton myself, is that it was very often looked at as if it was going to be two strong, combative midfielders busting down walls in there. Before Bruno dropped in there, that's kind of what it was. Casemiro and Ugarte fighting, two midfielders who can fight, who cover a lot of ground, all of that. Then Bruno dropped into there, and we're seeing that I think Ruben Amram is feeling as though he wants more of an attacker in a position deep, because you're not able to get the ball forward enough otherwise in the Premier League. So if that's the case, I think Adam Wharton comes back into consideration. Because the concern about Wharton at Palace is that he's not super combative. He's sitting deep most of the time. He's sitting in front of a back three most of the time. He's not energetically covering a lot of ground or anything like that. But maybe we don't need that. Again, if we make this kind of consideration of how we're playing now, he matches a lot of what we're doing here. Now, his passing percentages and things are lower, but of course, that's simply because of how Palace play. He's spending his whole game deep, sending more long balls in behind, things like that, lower percentage passing, but it's working. And he is performing on a regular basis at a high level. If you took Adam Wharton right now, dropped him in our team in place of Casemiro, I think he'd be successful. We don't need this number 6 at this point in time busting a gut up and down the field all the time. We need them sitting in exactly this space where he's spending his time sitting, covering the gap behind Bruno, getting those balls quickly out wide into the channels, into runners, up to Šeško, out to the wingbacks. He can do that job. He can do that job very, very well. So Adam Wharton is one for me that could certainly come back under, well, I'm not the decision maker, but for me, he's come back under consideration. He's always been under consideration for the club, and I think he would make actually a fantastic option if we are looking for what Casemiro is providing. Not a better Ugarte, not a better, more combative midfielder, but a better sitter. Then Adam Wharton fits really, really well into that mold. Then we come to Carlos Balaba. Obviously, he's had a bit of a rough start to the season. I think that is something that is a bit concerning. We've all seen the potential. Balaba, the stats aren't going to tell us much. None of that's going to tell us much. We've all seen the potential with Balaba. We've seen him play. He needs to ramp up his play. He needs to improve. It's a bit of a difficult one here, because if he's performing poorly, United aren't going to want to pay that much money in January. Alternatively, then Brighton might not want to sell because they're going to be looking at him and going, well, why would we sell him at a low right now when we think he'll do better later and there'll be more competition? But Balaba is one that I think could do any of these roles. He's a very good tackler. He's a very good ball winner. He can sit deep. He can press up. And I think that's why he's been under consideration as potentially the most viable option, because as we see here, like, this midfield maybe is in a little bit of flux. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet or the exact traits that are wanted. Balaba could be either. He can sit. He can go around. He's got all of the skill set, but he has to show it as well. So that one is complicated in that respect, but I think that Balaba is, in fact, a very good option still, and one I hope United will go for. But I think the fact that he's not performing is almost maybe making it more difficult in January, because United are going to be wary of paying a lot then, and Brighton may not be inclined to sell, so we will see. Then there's Elliot Anderson. Elliot Anderson is performing at an exceptional level this season, even though Forest are really bad at the moment. Under all of that, he's been performing really well. He's been having amazing games. And if you look at Elliot Anderson, he's doing it all over the place. And Elliot Anderson, I see when I watch him and look at the stats, I think that Elliot Anderson, for me, would make an amazing Bruno Fernandez replacement. If you're looking at a number 8 who can get the ball forward, who can attack, who can move it around, who can do all of that, but is also a bit more competent defensively, I think Elliot Anderson is your guy. If you were to ask me to build the perfect midfield right now, based on my understanding of this system, I'd probably go Wharton and Anderson or Balaba and Anderson as my 2. I would get both, plop them in there. If Bruno leaves, I could see us going for someone like Elliot Anderson, but there's going to be a lot of competition because Liverpool, City, all looking for midfielders as well over the next couple of windows. It's going to be difficult. United have to win some games and be in European places, and hopefully gives them a better shot at competing for some of these guys. So those are the main names right now. I'm sure there are more names being looked at, but I do know these are all names that are on United's list at this point in time. So the first question, which we don't 100% have the answer to, but we're getting an idea, is what does Amarim's ideal midfield look like, and what does it look like in the Premier League? Well, even if we switched to a back 4 and went to a different 4-3-3 or something like that, you probably would need any of these profiles anyway. Our midfield is light, so nothing that we buy, I think, is going to hinder us in the future. We need all profiles in the midfield. So it's okay to say, yeah, what could we get for Amarim? If something doesn't work out in the future, they'll still be viable. Okay, we'll still need a sitting 6. We'll still need we might need combative 8s. We'll still need creative 8s and 10s. There's many midfield iterations we could build. So I don't think we can go wrong because the midfield has been so underinvested over the last 10 years. So if the ideal midfield is a more creative 8 and a 6 that's sort of sitting, and we know Casemiro is leaving, then that 6 is definitely the priority, more of a sitter there. Then that person, I think the best option right now is Adam Wharton, and I think the second best option is Hjulmand, with Balaba being this wild card of, like, he could be great at all of it, and maybe still the best player we could buy for any type of role. If it's to be a bit more aggressive in the future, and we're going to get new center backs, and the center backs are going to be like De Ligt, and they're going to be so aggressive stepping up, and we're going to get a left-sided center back, or Lissandro comes back and replaces Shaw, and he's busting it into the midfield, and De Ligt is in the midfield, and everybody's pushing up high and squeezing those gaps, and we want a lot of energy, then I'm looking for, maybe, I don't know, maybe Anderson at that point. But then I'm probably looking for a Balaba or something like that. If Bruno leaves, I'm looking at somebody like Elliot Anderson to replace him as a second sort of midfielder there. So honestly, with a lot of these options, you can't really go wrong, I would say. I like the list because I can see how they all fit different positions and roles. I think one of the only mistakes you could make is buying someone like Elliot Anderson and asking him to be the sitter. That might not work particularly well. I think you'd be neutralizing his strong suits. You might not want to get someone like Adam Wharton if you decide you want a really combative midfield in the future that is going to press up really high, all of that. So you could get it wrong in those options. And then you have Bouaddi and Balaba that make for 2 young, really high potential midfielders. My choices today, overall, with what I think would work, with an eye as well in the future, if it didn't work out with Emram and we changed managers, which I still don't think is happening anytime soon. But if it didn't, who would fit the best? I still think that I think your best bet would be Balaba and Anderson. I think those would be the two midfielders I would buy if money was no object. And my first would still be Balaba and my second, Anderson. But yeah, you really can't go wrong, but it's an interesting look at the dynamics of our midfield. We'll have to see if they change between now and January. We're still evolving in this respect. We'll see if Emram's ideas of setting it up changes over the course of the season. We'll see what happens with Bruno to find out better what we're going to do. And as we answer those questions, I think who will become very, very clear of these names in terms of how they fit, where they fit, and who are the right choice. Okay, that's what I've got. Let me know your thoughts. Just kind of an interesting discussion for the international break to look through all these players, see how they're doing so far this season, and see what we're thinking about this midfield for the future, which, again, could come into play as soon as January. If Kobbie Mainoo ends up replacing Bruno, I don't think it changes this much. Kobbie Mainoo is a better out-of-possession player, but he's not super pacey. He's not going to cover in crazy amounts of ground. So you're still going to need either a sitter to kind of play behind him, or you're going to need those center backs to be incredibly aggressive, stepping up. So again, we'll see how that evolves over the course of this season as well. Okay, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.